Welcome to Chinwag Tuesdays, your passport to a world of language and culture.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Chinwag Tuesdays. I'm Amanda, and today's special guest is Anna, an Aussie who's been living in Munich, Germany for over 10 years and now teaches English to teachers. Thank you so much for being here today, Anna.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to have a chance to chinwag on a Tuesday.
Yes. Actually, do you get a chance to talk to many Australians?
Look, in Munich, there are a lot of Australians. I don't know where
Okay.
they are. They're not where I am. I actually have one neighbour who's Australian. So
Really?
yeah, so we chat a bit. He's from Sydney, and he always says to me, "Oh, I love it when you talk. I love hearing your accent. It makes me feel so warm." And so that's really nice.
Yeah, I bet. That's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, actually, I don't just interview Aussies, but the chances I get, it always feels really nice just to hear an accent that's not my family's.
Yeah, I get that.
All right. How about a self-introduction? Where in Australia you're from and why did you move to Germany?
Okay, I will give you the Reader's Digest version of that story. I was born in Cairns and I lived in country New South Wales for most of my life. And then I ended up in Melbourne studying and working as a high school English and literature teacher. And I decided I wanted to travel a bit after I'd done a significant amount of teaching in Melbourne. And on the second day of my solo 6-month trip, I met a fellow called Daniel who was from Germany. And the rest, they say, is history.
Oh, I'm just laughing because it's what happened to me.
It happens.
But not Germany, obviously. Yeah.
It happens. Yeah. So that's how I ended up. Well, actually, I went via Turkey. I had a year teaching in Istanbul in a private school. And then I came to Germany, and that was 2013. So this is my 11th.
Wow.
My 11th year. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Do you still find it hard?
Yes, I do. I have moments. I mean, if I think back to how hard it was in the beginning, I would say it's a lot easier. But yeah, I still have moments. And I guess I naively thought Australian and German culture were relatively similar. Sort of, you talk about the cultural iceberg, the things that you see, of course, they're different, but I thought the stuff under the surface, we've got similar kinds of attitudes and behaviours, but there's a level of formality here in Germany that I'm really not used to as an Australian. So in German, like in French, they have the formal and the informal you. That's something I'm not used to.
Hindi.
Yeah. And then calling most people, like I call my boss by Mrs. I don't use her first name. And to me, that's something that I'm not used to. And never knowing whether it's okay to switch from the formal Sie to the informal du. And I don't want to offend people, but it seems somehow cool to call people du. And I think, are you calling me du because I'm a foreigner or because you think I'm younger than you? Or anyway, it's sort of hard to get your head around something that you didn't grow up with.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many more questions now. Do you speak German?
I do. German's not an easy language.
Yep.
I battle with German. I still do German classes. If my German teacher hears this, she'll say, "Where have you been?" Because I've been off for a few months, but I've still been doing private German classes once a week. And I use German for work. Okay. I would say I'm probably B1 plus.
Okay.
I think unless, and I always say what I really need to do is go to a village in Germany where no one speaks English and I have no choice.
Yeah.
And I have this a lot where I go into a shop and my German is fine. Like I ask for something and they respond to me in English, which I find very frustrating. But I know people do it because they want to practice their English and they want to make me feel comfortable. And I don't want to be a stickler, but at the same time, if people always respond to me in English, look, it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but it makes it challenging.
Yeah.
Look, high German, like complicated contract language German is beyond me. I mean, I do read academic articles in German. So look, I speak German, but it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean to laugh before. I'm just laughing because like
No.
I'm relating to everything you're saying. It's exactly like for me here. I'm probably around B1 in Hindi. I go to cafes and order in Hindi and they reply back in English. I met my husband in English. So it's very hard to shift into
Yes.
Hindi because we've established that relationship in English, right?
People don't understand this. They say, why don't you just speak German with your husband? And I said, look, we try. And it's very strange for him as well to speak German to me. And his English, of course, was very good when I met him. And now it's extraordinary. But we have a son. And so we do one parent, one language. So I speak English only to him and my husband speaks German only to him. And I try to stick with that. And the only time I'll switch to German is if there's another kid or parent there who doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
And then my son often says to me, Mama, du machst so viele Fehler, like you make so many errors. And I'm like, yeah, okay. All
right. Yeah. See, it's so hard, especially if you can really get by in English. It's really difficult when you're not forced to learn the local language in that sense.
Yeah.
Like, I think this intermediate level that we're at is enough to function day to day.
This is the problem, the stagnation, and I feel it. And I think, how do I get myself? I mean, I can do everything I need to do. I can make a doctor's appointment. Actually, I got a referral for some physiotherapy and I had to make 6 appointments. And I mean, that's hard, but I did it. And that's not a problem for me. But just moving up, how do I move up? I'm so comfortable in the things I know how to say and how I say them that I don't ever, anyway, look, it's the struggle.
This is actually the topic that I'm kind of struggling with my Hindi teacher at the moment, is that I know I'm very comfortable in the level that I'm at and trying to move on up. It's just really tough. And she's like, you need to practice more. And I'm like, I know what I need to do. I teach my students all the time, but it's hard.
And this feels, I mean, I'm ashamed that I'm not better at German because I teach English. And that's my job. And I think, I mean, I'm embarrassed that my German's not better than, I mean, look, it's absolutely fine, but I don't know how to push myself. I mean, look, I probably need to start reading novels in German. I mean, I know because this is what I tell students to do. Read novels in German, watch TV in German.
Do active listening exercises. You know all the things you need to do. Yes, I completely relate. All right. So my next question, when you said before about how you naively thought that Australia and Germany would be very similar in some things, in culture, for example, did you find that there were any miscommunications between you and your husband because of those cultural differences?
So many.
And I'm laughing again because of my experience.
I don't know. Like, I just have these little things like, he said to me, where are my pajamas? And I said, I put them under your pillow. And he said, why did you put them under my pillow? And I said, because that's where they go. I mean, growing up in Australia, I would fold up my pajamas and I would put them under my pillow. And to him, it was as strange as, I don't know, putting them under the bed, like just little things like this that you take for granted, and a lot of idioms and phrases. Like, I remember it was a friend's birthday and we were singing happy birthday, and I went on to the second round, which is, you know, happy birthday to you, you look like a monkey and you smell like one too, or you know, why was she born so beautiful, why was she born at all? And I mean, people were like, what are you saying? I'm like, that's the song. These little kinds of things that, I don't know, it's and also things in language, like we have a dog and my husband says, do you want to walk the dog? And I say, I can. And in English, I can means I can, I'm willing to, I will, I'm going to. But in German, it means I can, but I don't really want to. And so then there's all this kind of miscommunication about what that actually means. And they're very, like, it's the same verb, but in context, you know, in terms of pragmatics, it has a different meaning. And this causes, and this still causes issues.
Oh, don't tell me that.
10 years on, I mean, look, everything's fine. I don't mean it like that, but it's just very interesting to realise that there's miscommunication because of understanding of the connotation of words, for example, or cultural practices.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, my husband and I, we've been together for 6.5 years, married for almost 5 years. And look, we still have these sorts of kind of miscommunications. We had one a few months ago where we have one of those like old home phones just on the wall. not like the old Telstra ones that we used to have, but, you know, it's still on the wall. It's not a cordless. It's actually a wired phone.
Mm.
And I walked out of like my office one day and the phone was off the hook. And it was sitting on the fridge. And I yelled out to him, I was like, why is the phone off the hook? And he's like, it's not, like it's connected. And I was like, no, why is the phone on the fridge? And he's like, oh, because I was trying to find my phone and I called it and I forgot to like put it back up or whatever. But he thought the phone was completely removed off the wall, but I was talking about the receiver being away from the base.
I know, and it's just a completely different thing, off the hook, And I mean, even, young people today, they don't understand the off the hook, because a mobile phone is, you can't have a mobile phone off the hook. I mean, it's always connected. I mean, I suppose you could leave the call running, but I think if the other person hangs up, the call ends anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And even just the phrases like to hang up, or I guess phrasal verbs to hang up or pick up, even now, like here in India, they say cut the call, as in to end the call. Whereas I would say hang up, but there's actually no hanging action
this
anymore.
Kind of, pick up, hang up, pick up, hang up, but it doesn't really work in the same way.
Yeah. So yes, no, I can definitely relate to all of those. All right. So I guess about living in Germany. So what has been the most challenging and rewarding aspect of living in Germany as an Aussie?
I don't want to generalize, but I'm going to. I live in Munich. So Munich is not like everywhere else. But German people are very, here we go. This is really dangerous. Some German people are very serious.
Okay.
And some might call it cold. I don't think it's cold because I know German people, but it can appear cold.
Okay.
And that's hard when you're Australian and you talk to people in the street and you say, hi, how are you? And you're warm and you're bubbly and you're friendly. People find that strange from me, that they're like, well, that's a bit too much. And that's hard because that's who I am. For example, I say to my students, please call me Anna. I know it's not what you used to, but I don't want you to call me by my surname. And that's strange for them. The rule focus, like you will have people tell you on the street you're doing the wrong thing.
Oh God, they're that direct.
The directness is something I find challenging. I mean, what's rewarding to me is how far I've come with German, to think of when I first moved here and I knew numbers and foods and greeting and how much more I understand about another culture. When I was thinking about this question, I'm thinking about broad-mindedness and what it gives us when we live somewhere else. Because I think if you only stay where you are, and look, for some people that's what they want to do, and I understand that, but when you live somewhere else, you understand how another group of people live and how another group of people behave based on what's happened to them as a group of people. I mean, Germany obviously has a very significant history. National pride here is not something that you see a lot, and that I find sad. I understand why, but those sort of things are interesting. But to get back to the question, what's rewarding is that I have broadened my horizons. I mean, I know that's a bit of a cliche, but, you know, it's allowed me to see what it's like for other people and how societies are different, and they really are different. So that's been the rewarding part, is understanding more about my own culture and more about other cultures as well.
Did you find that it took you moving outside of Australia to appreciate it more?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I travelled first for 6 months and then I lived in Istanbul for a year, which was a sort of amazing, crazy experience. But taking things for granted, about how warm Australian people are, what an extraordinary landscape it is, how lucky we are in terms of resources and fruit and vegetables and the landscape. So it has really made me appreciate. And I love when I fly home and someone says to me, "G'day, love," and I think, oh my gosh, I'm home. It's so warm. I just love it. I
think I've told this story on another episode, but it fits, so I'll say it again. When I was going back to Australia for the first time after leaving, it'd been 3.5 years because of COVID, I had a bit of anxiety traveling. It was after COVID. It was just such an uncertain time. I felt like a deer in the headlights walking through Singapore airport during my layover. I had turned vegetarian after moving away from Australia. So it was my first time going back as a vegetarian. I didn't know what I could eat at the airport. There was just a lot of kind of culture shocks I was having just from traveling back. And I remember being at 7-Eleven buying snacks for the flight right before I had to board. And there was a man being served in front of me. And the cashier said to him, "Do you want a bag for that?" And he's like, "Nah, mate, she'll be right." Oh, I nearly cried.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm so close to home.
Mm-hmm. I know, it's so nice. It's so nice. It's just a warm feeling. A sense of who you are as a country, who you are as a people. And I understand. Yeah.
Do you get a chance to go home often?
So we were just home over summer, like over European summer.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that was really nice. We had some time in Darwin, which was extraordinary.
We've never been to Darwin. This time of year is amazing.
Yeah, we had the Darwin Festival, and we went to NEMA, to the National Indigenous Music Awards, which was really cool, and saw some great performances, and went to Litchfield Park, and it was just amazing. And then time in Melbourne with my family, and then we had time in Singapore on the way home. Yeah. I mean, we can't go every year, but we certainly try to go every 2 or 3 years. It's a big trip from Munich.
I bet it is. Gosh. I actually lived in Darwin for 2 years, and it was probably the best time of my life, actually. There's this kind of joke that when you live in Darwin, you either get addicted to exercise or you get addicted to alcohol. There's like no in between. Yeah, I definitely experienced one or the other.
Yeah. I mean, it's an extreme place to live, but I loved it. I loved that people, I love the way people dress. People embrace this kind of, this Indigenous art. They wear it. Yeah. I mean, maybe that was just from what I saw at the festival, but it was so cool.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Oh, that's amazing. Did you go down to Mindle Beach markets?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we sat and watched the sunset. And had some
Which you don't see sunsets like that on the East Coast.
Look, sunsets in Darwin. I mean, my friend had a balcony, and we sat on the balcony every night and watched the sunset, and had delicious Sri Lankan food. At Mindle. Oh, it was great. It was really good. But I'm very grateful that on the last day we were there, we went to Crocosaurus Cove and saw the crocodiles, because had I seen them before, at the beginning of the trip, I don't think I would have got into any body of water. I had seen crocodiles, but I was astounded at how big they are.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. The saltwater crocodile. I mean, prehistoric. Scary.
There's this Instagram account. His name is Wild Man Adventures, and he actually lives, I think he might live in Darwin, but he spends a lot of time down in the Adelaide River, where they do like the jumping croc tours and stuff like that. My God, the videos he posts of these saltwater crocs.
Oh my God.
Crazy. He posted one a few weeks ago of a croc that was eating another crocodile that had died. My God, crazy.
Yeah, I know. Really, really mind-blowing, I would say. Mind-blowing.
Yeah. Which part of country New South Wales did you live in when you were living there?
Look, I spent most of my time in Albury.
Ah, okay. I have family that used to live there. Then they moved to Townsville, but they're planning to move back. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's nice. I mean, the Murray River's just beautiful. That was my favourite thing about Albury. Summers we just spent jumping in the river and floating down, and then getting out and walking across and jumping back in. And it was a nice place to grow up.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. All right. Well, on the topic of teaching, how did you make the transition from teaching English to students to teaching other teachers? So what was the sort of motivator behind the shift?
Look, I feel like I sort of fell into it a little bit. I have been teaching. I mean, I've been teaching now for more than 20 years in lots of different contexts. When I first came to Munich, I was freelance teaching, which was not ideal for me. I'd been used to a very stable job, and I spent a lot of time traveling on trains and buses, and I actually really liked my clients. I had some one-on-one clients, but I also worked with a lot of businesses, banks and law firms and media firms and those sorts of things. But it wasn't an ideal situation for me, and I really wanted to get something permanent. And I was also teaching at the Technical University here, teaching business English. And my boss there said to me, if you want a chance at a permanent job, you need a master's. And I had an undergraduate and honours and a diploma of education and a lot of teaching experience. And I thought, okay, I'll go and get a master's. I mean, the good thing about Germany, it's essentially free to study here. I looked at doing a master's from Australia and it was going to cost me $60,000 or $70,000. And I was thinking, anyway, so I started doing a master's here at the University of Munich in English studies, and my focus was TEFL, so teaching English as a foreign language, and literature, which was always a love of mine. And so I got through the master's and did really well, and wrote my thesis actually about picture books about Australian illustrator author Bob Graham, who's is a fantastic picture book author and illustrator. And then I sort of had a bit of time and I thought, what am I going to do? And I had this thing about a PhD in my head for a long time. And so I thought, I'm just going to make an appointment with the TEFL chair, with the head of the TEFL department, and talk to her about it. And she had been a teacher of mine. And so I had this Zoom meeting and she asked me, what have you been doing? And I told her everything I'd been doing. And she said, well, do you want to come and do your PhD here and have a paid PhD position and teach the German teaching students? And I said, well, sure. So that's how I fell into it, I suppose. And so I've been here for 3 years. Love teaching teachers. I'm really passionate about education. I'm really passionate about language learning. So that's how I ended up where I am, working on my PhD and teaching.
Incredible.
Etc. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I love hearing these kind of stories where and I think most people I've interviewed, wherever they're at now, which they've kind of stumbled into the position they're in. And I really relate to that because I kind of stumbled into this in a way as well. So that's really cool. Yeah. Good for you. That's great.
Thanks.
So what are some common challenges that you see teachers facing when teaching English? I guess obviously in Germany, because that's where you are. And how do you help them overcome them?
I think, there's a lot of things. Teaching can be extremely overwhelming. I think if you're going in to teach in a school system, there's a lot to think about. And one of the things I really try to do is talk a lot about classroom practice, give a lot of anecdotes, talk about what you do but also talk about how you can have fun and be creative and make it light. And it's serious because you have to follow a curriculum and that's challenging. But, let's engage our students and make it really interesting. Try and talk as much about experience and answer questions and do activities where we come up with ideas or we think about what would we say if this happened. One of the other challenges, I think, is ChatGPT, AI, because, look, we have students who put some commands in ChatGPT and then produce an essay. And the reality is we can't stop that. But we can be proactive and teach learning teachers to teach their students how to use AI as a tool that can help them rather than a tool that can do their homework for them. It's like a harm minimization approach, this idea of let's actually take this as a wonderful tool. Let's talk about it in classrooms. It shouldn't be taboo because it's here and it's not going anywhere and it's becoming more powerful, more efficient. But how can we use it to our benefit rather than using it to create an essay for our homework? That's something as well that I think is really important to focus on.
Yeah. Do you find that teachers are open to I guess, learning about AI? Because like you said, it is a little bit taboo. And I feel like there's two camps where people embrace it and other people are refusing to. The teachers that you teach mostly open to the idea of AI?
Absolutely. And I think they want to know how to use it better. I was talking to a friend and she was telling me about how she uses it to sort of help her with an outline rather than, I love curriculum writing, so let's do the fun stuff ourselves, but let's ask ChatGPT to give us a kind of overview of a course for 10 weeks where we have these outcomes and we want to cover this. And so it's going to give us resources, suggest resources, suggest approaches, but then we get to do the fun stuff ourselves. And we don't have to do exactly what it says. We can also take it and modify it, and we can work more efficiently by harnessing the power of AI rather than being scared of it. Because it's as I said, it's not going anywhere.
Yes, exactly right. I did a live on the weekend with an English teacher from Australia who lives in Japan, similar situation. Her husband's Japanese, so she moved there and she teaches English there. And one of the questions we got in the live was if we use AI, and I kind of had a similar answer in that it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. And I think if you don't embrace it or learn how you can use it to your benefit, then you're either going to get left behind or you will get left behind, basically, because it's not going anywhere. So learning how you can use it to, whether it is doing the outline of the lesson plans or whatever that looks like for you, I think it's pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, technology's all around us and it can help us. It can save us time and it can make us better.
Yeah, for sure. I actually follow this one account on Instagram. I think it's like Teachers of English or something. I'll have to double check. But she's recently posted a couple of reels on the way she uses ChatGPT to help her with lesson plans, or even it's so advanced now that you can take a screenshot on your computer and upload that and then basically ask it to do whatever to create the outline of a lesson plan. That's how advanced it is now. So yeah, it's actually really interesting to see the different ways people use it to help them in class.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm actually working on an Australian slang course at the moment. Well, I'm finished it. It's in the pre-launch period. And I actually have a lesson in there on how to use ChatGPT to learn and understand slang. But the pragmatic side, so asking it the right prompts on if this is appropriate in the workplace or how common is this slang word, because as you would know, slang can be regional, it can be generational. I'm pretty sure, being from regional New South Wales, some of the slang that you grew up with is probably very different to, say, CBD Melbourne.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I've given like a list of, I think, 10 different prompts of how people can ask ChatGPT different like contexts and situations and things like that, because I can give different contexts, but there's always going to be different situations. So I think it's really important to be able to show people how they can use it to their benefit, especially with something as diverse as Australian slang, but knowing how to ask it so it doesn't give you some really generic response. And sometimes if you ask it to write like a typical Australian conversation, it's like, "G'day Sheila, g'day mate." That's not typical.
No one
like
says
maybe
that.
50 years
no
ago.
No one says that.
Yeah,
no.
The different kind of prompts to make sure you get something that is accurate for 2024. Yeah. So I really enjoyed making that lesson.
Yeah, I bet. I've talked about Australian English as well. When I taught at the Technical University, I did a course on Australian culture, which was just so much to sort of break down what's Australian culture. It's so much more complicated than I ever thought it would be. And we talked about language, and we talked about these fun things like shortening of names, and the students gave me their name and I told them how it would be shortened if they were in Australia. But the other interesting thing I was thinking about is when I first came here, I taught in a language school with quite a few British people. And again, I assumed that a lot of the language I used came from British English. And a friend of mine invited me for drinks, and in the end I said I couldn't come, and I wrote her a message and I said, "Sorry to be a piker." And she wrote back and she said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And I thought, so the verb is to pike out, to be a piker, which means you change your mind and you don't partake in something, or to bail. And I thought it was a British thing, pike, and she had no idea what I was talking about. So that was really interesting as well. I mean, I thought a lot of this stuff came from British English, but less than I thought actually comes from British English.
I just read a book a few weeks ago. I think it's called The History of Australian English. I'll have to send you all of these things that I'm saying I've read something or seen something. But if you're interested in reading, it talks about the history of Australian English and basically how, originally it started off as British English, but it was a blend of the different dialects of English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, that sort of thing. But then the ways that it changed and adapted according to the different events in history. So the gold rush, basically the criminal English, because that was the thing. I can't remember the exact term for it.
So the convicts. So the convicts and the first settlers, but also the British soldiers who were there, and all of this mixing together, affecting not only the accent but the language.
Really and for most of these convicts, until they kind of all got put on the first fleet, or even after the first fleet, they got put on these ships, they didn't realize that other dialects of English existed. So they couldn't even communicate with each other very well, even though they were all speaking English. They were so different with their different terms. But it's a pretty long book, but very interesting, a little bit technical. So if people are listening to this and want to read it, it took me a while because I had to break it up a little bit because it was very technical. But yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot online as well about accent and about the development of the accent and language.
Yeah,
that's sort of more accessible as well, stuff that I used in the course that I taught.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. On the topic of British English, actually, and I was going to mention it before when you were talking about happy birthday, I interviewed an Australian who is from Melbourne, but she teaches Italian as a second language because she's of Italian heritage. She now lives in London, and she had to move when Brexit and all that happened. So she had to leave Italy. She ended up in London, and she assumed that British culture would be very similar to Australian culture. And it wasn't until like, same thing, they were cutting a cake for someone's birthday, and she was like saying how, oh no, you've got to make sure the knife comes out clean, and if it doesn't, you've got to kiss the person, the closest male to your left. And everyone was looking at her like, Michelle, what are you talking about? She was like, that's how you cut a cake, isn't it?
Just assuming that it's the same. And if you think of a Venn diagram with British and Australian, yes, there is an overlap, but there's also a lot that's distinct. A lot.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. All right. What skills or methods do you focus on most when training other teachers?
Look, my biggest thing is really, and this is foundational, that's about building rapport. I feel like if you don't have rapport, which is this positive relationship with your students, everything else kind of rests on that. So one of the first things I do is really talk about relationships and respect and how to build rapport and how to make your classroom a positive environment where people feel like they can take risks, because we know that language learning is challenging and it's something that can involve a lot of anxiety for people. And so for me, what I try and do in my classrooms and try and encourage my students to do in their classrooms is to build rapport with students and to create an environment where people feel safe to make a mistake or safe to ask a question that they're not sure about. So that's one of my interests and one of the things that I do. The other thing that I would say is I'm really interested in working with authentic texts, so working with texts that were not written for pedagogical purposes, texts that were written for native speakers by native speakers, because I think that there's so much there in terms of motivation, in terms of this real life communicative language practice. And it doesn't mean that we're throwing the textbook out. The textbook's still a valuable resource, but let's look at how, I don't know, how the first conditionals formed in the textbook, and then let's watch a TV series where it's used, because then we actually see it in real life. So I'm really interested in working with films. I've taught a course a few times about using films. And yes, it can be for film literacy, but it can also be to practice grammar. I've given lots of examples. Here's a short film, and there's lots of wordless short films out there on YouTube, for example, and using this to practice the continuous tense, for example. So to talk over the film and talk about what the character's doing. He is running. He is going to get a sandwich. He is eating his sandwich. So actually applying what you've learned in real life situations or in a fun kind of situation. I'm very interested in working with images as well. I think there's a lot to be done there. So I guess this idea of working with authentic text to practice language, to get creative, to argue, to use persuasive language, whatever it might be, is also really related to this idea of building rapport and building a fun, safe, positive classroom environment.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're a wealth of knowledge. You have so much experience. It's amazing. Now, what advice would you give to teachers who are considering moving abroad to teach?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to tell you all the things I didn't do. Do your research. Really do your research. So find out what the situation is where you want to go and teach. So in Germany, for example, it's unlikely you'll get a job that's a permanent job that pays you holidays and pays you sick days. You'll be working as a freelancer, for example. That's fine, but you've got to work out whether that's going to be something that's going to work for you. And financially, it's not great. It's fairly unstable, I would say. So really work out where you're going and what you're going to be doing, and are you going to be able to afford to live? I mean, I don't know what it's like in other places. I certainly know what it's like in Germany. It was very challenging for me. So do your research, really work out what's needed, what sort of hours you'll be doing. Are you going to be earning enough money? Is it the kind of lifestyle that you want to be leading? The other thing I would say is knowing a language. I'm talking about native speakers here. Knowing a language as a native speaker is very different than teaching it. I had a huge learning curve when I moved to Germany because I realised I had been an English and literature teacher for 10 years, that I knew instinctively about my language, but I didn't necessarily know how to explain it. So I'll give you an example. What's the present perfect? If you can't tell me what the present perfect is and you're a native speaker, you need to go and do a language course. So the present perfect, what are 3 reasons we use this present perfect? If you can't answer that question, but you need to go and do a language course, like a language teaching course, because there's a huge difference between being a native speaker and being able to break down and teach and explain how your own language works, because it's not something we're taught at school. We're not taught what the different tenses are. We know how to use them and when to use them, but we don't know the difference between the present simple and the present continuous, the present perfect, the past perfect, the future perfect. It's hard.
The conditionals.
The conditionals, the modal verbs, the state verbs. Really hard. And if you are a proficient English user who's not a native speaker, in Germany, it would be difficult for you to get a job. In other places, maybe you could get a job. But I would say in Germany, they really only hire native speakers of English in language schools, for example. Not all places. But this is what I mean about do your research, know what your situation is. And don't just assume. I don't want to be negative, but don't just assume because you can speak your language that you can teach it. Huge difference.
This is so true, because when I started learning Hindi and I was looking for a tutor, my husband said, why? I can just teach you.
No.
One day. No. And we were like at each other's throats, like, because I am a very visual person, but I also ask a lot of questions. I need to know why for everything. Why this, why that? And he was like, that's just how it is. And I'm like, well, that's not
hopeless. Hopeless. And when you're a language teacher, you want to know, because you're trying to make this bridge between what happens in your language and what happens in another language.
Yeah.
And if your partner, for example, or your friends can't answer that question.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I still remember when I said to him one day, like, what's the difference between apka and apna? So apka means your. Apna means my own. So if I want to say like my work, I would say apna kaam. But when I was learning apna, I didn't know the difference. I thought it was just your, the same. And he's like, apka is your and apna is apna. And I was like, how is that useful?
No, not useful at all. Not useful at all. Yeah, you need someone who can actually break it down for you and tell you why and give you, I mean, for example, with the present perfect, these kind of key words like just. I have just seen him. So we know when we use just, we're talking about the recent past. I've just eaten. Or ever might be when we're talking about life experience. Have you ever been to India? Have you ever been to Munich? And these kind of keywords that help you. And as a native speaker, you use it, but you might be able to teach someone. Think about just for the recent past and think about ever for life experience when you're using the present perfect.
Yeah. Did you find that when you started learning German that you were able to understand English grammar a bit better? Or like the English? Because I found that with Hindi that I was just able to understand on the topic of present perfect. It's something I really struggled with. Obviously, then I started learning more about it and I actually learned about it. But then now I understand the present perfect more in Hindi. It's helping me understand it even more in English.
I mean, one of the things that's difficult here, this is the other thing when I start to learn German, I understand why German speakers have a difficulty with a particular aspect of English. For example, in German, you use have to talk about the past simple.
Okay.
Yeah. So ich habe gerade gegessen. I just ate. Or ich habe, think of a single example now, of course.
On the spot.
Yeah. Ich habe das gemacht. I did it. And so this is complicated because we don't sort of have the present perfect exactly in German. We have the past simple, but we're using it with the verb to have.
Right. Oh, that's confusing.
In German, there's no continuous tense. So how do you explain to someone what the continuous tense is if there's not really a continuous tense in German?
Yeah, right.
I don't think English is difficult to learn, but I am aware that there are a lot of tenses in English.
Yeah.
A lot. But when I start to understand German, why German speakers have difficulty with aspects of English because of what's happening in German, and they're trying to make a comparison, and the comparison doesn't exist.
Yeah, I've just thought of a question that I got on a Q&A that I did last week, but I didn't have time to, research it because I didn't know the answer. But the question was, what are some common mispronunciations that German speakers have in English?
Yeah, the V sound is very difficult for Germans to make.
Okay.
So instead of environment, you might have environment. My son's name is Wallace with a W, so he gets Wallace a lot.
Right. Okay.
So that W and the TH sound is very hard for Germans to make as well because it doesn't really exist so much. And in German, there's a lot of words that end with ELN, and I find that very hard to say. Like Zwiebeln, which is onions, ELN. That ELN sound doesn't really exist so much in English. Yeah. But when I was trying to learn Turkish, I didn't do a very good job. I learned that there's Turkish sounds in Turkish that English speakers can't even hear. Can't even hear the difference between, So Turkish I didn't get very far with Turkish. Very hard for an English speaker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll have to pass that on because that was, I actually had no idea and I was going to research it, but then I ran out of time to reply to the rest of the questions. Yeah. Someone asked me about the common mistakes for Indian speakers. Well, I know that I can answer that very well, but yeah. All right. So last question. What do you do? This is not on the list, but I just thought of it. But what do you normally do if you're feeling homesick for Australia? If it still happens.
Look, it does happen. It happens sort of when I don't expect it to, when something's happening at home. The Australian Open's on, or if I know it's a certain time of year, or actually there's a German guy who's just started making meat pies. So he makes these Australian-style meat pies. And I saw the ad on Instagram.
Half your luck.
Yeah. And so I ordered, this is our second lot now, I ordered 10 pies. So he does beef pies, but he also does things. So something like that's really nice, being able to have real Australian pie. So something like that. I don't know, what else do I do if I'm homesick? Sometimes talking to family works. Sometimes it makes it harder. That's hard.
Yeah. I avoid my family sometimes when I'm homesick, which kind of doesn't make any sense, but
it does, because it can make you really bring the emotions right to the forefront, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to embrace what's really nice about Munich. I mean, Munich has a beautiful river called the Isar, which runs right through it that you can swim in summer. We've got Christmas markets coming up, so sort of as to counteract homesickness, to think about what's really nice where you live. I mean, Munich's beautiful and green, and there's mountains all around, and it's very clean, and there's lots of things to really enjoy. So maybe throw yourself into your new culture rather than thinking about what you're missing, what you're lacking.
Yeah. You know what I made literally just before this interview? It's not something that I really, it's not even like a typical Australian thing, to be honest, but did you ever eat tuna mornay?
Oh, I make tuna mornay all the time.
Well, apparently, I didn't know that. Look, to be honest, I think the name tuna mornay might be Australian, but everywhere else it's just a tuna pasta bake or something, right?
Yeah.
So tuna is very hard to come by here. I have to get it on Amazon, and I randomly thought of it. I'm like, I'm going to make this tuna mornay. So I've actually just made it. So after this, I'm going to eat tuna mornay.
Yeah. I mean, we have Vegemite and Promite always in our cupboard at great expense.
Yeah.
And the whole family loves it. We actually bought another suitcase coming back from Australia this time, and it was filled with chicken cream peas, Tim Tams, freckles, taquitos, summer rolls, because coconut chocolate, which is actually New Zealand, but we can adopt that. So all those little things.
That's a coconut ruff. The coconut ruff.
No, not coconut ruff, coconut slab Whitakers, or the big block.
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Mm-hmm. The coconut ruff is also good.
Yeah, yum.
So just those little things that you can't get here are always a nice reminder of home as well.
Yeah. My mum came to visit us a couple of years ago. It was like during COVID, so I hadn't been back home yet, and she brought over lots of like chocolates and snacks and just simple things like the plain salted Doritos in the green packet, because here they're all flavored. That your cheese, that your sweet chili, there's masala
they're very rich,
flavored.
aren't they?
Yeah. And so she just brought these plain salted Doritos. That's all I felt like. And then she brought like caramello koalas, Freddo frogs. And my husband was calling them the chocolate teddy bears.
Oh no, they're so good. My son loves caramello koalas as well. They're really good.
Yeah. And for a while they stopped making Starburst, the red flavor, I think it was, which was my favorite, the cherry flavor. I think they couldn't get an ingredient for it or something, but I think they might be back now.
I've got some bad news for you about Starburst. I think they're one of the worst things that you can eat. Maybe that's Skittles. Probably. I read somewhere. Don't worry, I ate a whole pack of Snakes Alive last week or the week before. They were really good. I really like the yellow ones.
Yeah. There is a shop here in my city, and they sell international groceries, and they actually do have Tim Tams sometimes. And my husband brought home like 6 packets once.
Oh my goodness.
And some Snakes Alive. Yeah, there was some Snakes Alive in there. Yeah. So I don't know. It's really exciting when you find those little things, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We used to have a British store here. I think they called it the Commonwealth store. So they sold things from Britain and South Africa and Australia and Canada, but he had to shut down because of Brexit. I think it was too expensive for him to get the British stuff.
Oh, that's a shame.
It was a bit of a pity.
Yeah.
He always had good stuff, and I always liked going in. He had nice tea towels and nice jam and all that kind of stuff at great expense. But he was a victim of Brexit. Yeah.
My mum sent me a box of like a Christmas care package when borders opened up and she could send things. So ironic, because there was these cute Christmas tea towels, hand towels, I think they were. No, tea towels. They were made in India.
Of course they were. Yeah.
They were from Kmart.
Yeah.
They were like these cute little, they had like koalas on them or something saying Merry Christmas. And the tag said made in India.
Yeah. I mean, look, nothing's manufactured in Australia anymore. What's interesting is that Germany manufactures a lot. I pick up a little thing and it says made in Germany. And I mean, it's extraordinary because nothing's made in Australia anymore. Hasn't been for years and years, which is a bit sad. I'm
in this Facebook group, and it's like, I think it's called Made in Australia or something. And basically it's just people sharing products that they found that are made in Australia, or it's kind of like a public service announcement. This is saying that it's made from Australian ingredients, but it's made in this country.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Or designed in Australia, made in China. I find that a lot too.
Yeah, ingredients sourced from somewhere and just put together in Australia or something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happening a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, we've been talking for nearly an hour. Sorry, I had all of these extra questions come up.
No worries.
Now,
it was good fun.
If people wanted to contact you, is there a way, like if there's other teachers that want to contact you or anything like that?
Sure. Yep. I'm happy to give my email, just my private email address. That's fine. Yep.
Okay, cool.
No worries.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to talk to anyone who's interested about these kinds of approaches or what it's like teaching other places.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also working on my PhD at the moment, and that's about mindfulness in English language teaching. So that's also an interest of mine. But it's non-meditative mindfulness, sort of socio-cognitive mindfulness. So that's what I'm working on mainly at the moment. Yeah.
Look at you go. Great. Very inspiring.
Keeping myself busy.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Anna. It's been really great chatting.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Amanda.